And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to talk about some of the nightmare matchups for a lot of these teams that are expected to make the playoffs. But before I do that, I will touch on the Ben Simmons thing that I brought up previously. The reason why I do not think he has these back problems is because they end up being so convenient for him. Like, Carrito, he mentioned in the chat, like, he read Ben Simmons can't even sit down, and, like, he has a grandfather who had back pains. Again, I hope your grandfather's all right, but regardless, there's a difference between comparing someone's grandfather to comparing an NBA athlete. Like, there's a very huge difference between those two, and while I don't want to say that, like, maybe he legitimately does have back pains, but I do find it odd how it's so convenient in his favor. Because when there was Kevin Durant and when there was Kyrie Irving on the Brooklyn Nets, and Ben Simmons gets traded, it was expected that Ben Simmons was going to make his return in the playoffs. It was very highly anticipated. There were a lot of reports saying that, yes, Ben Simmons is almost surely going to play in this game. And then all of a sudden, nope, he has back problems. And it's just so convenient because it's like, how are we getting news like over and over and over again that he was going to end up playing the game, and then once game day arrives, he has these back problems? It's convenient, and I don't think that he legitimately has them. Like, he might have them, but I think it's over-exaggerated just so he wouldn't have to play. I'm sorry, that's my personal opinion on it, but strictly because it was convenient for him in those playoffs. Because they don't just pop out of nowhere like that. They don't. Like, they have to be there. And, like, we were getting absolutely zero reports of them being there in the first place when he was on Brooklyn and when he got traded there. Like, he obviously, like, he was still, like, getting rehabbed and, like, making sure that, like, everything was fine and things of that nature, which is understandable. And it's understandable that he didn't play the remainder of the season. But at the time when the playoffs were coming, everyone was saying that he was going to play. And then out of nowhere, nope, he doesn't play. At the last second. And it's convenient. Ridiculously convenient. That's just my take on it, and those are my opinions. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pivot into the next question, the next segment, which is going to be about the nightmare scenarios for all of these playoff teams. And there's more in the comments. Okay. So Carrito has more to say. If I could just scroll up real quick. Jesus. All right. Kevin Durant. You're Kevin Durant. You're a beast. You're a top 3 player. Show them you're a top 3 player. I mean, look. He wasn't playing well in that series whatsoever. So I put more of the blame on Ben Simmons for not even wanting to show up. And I mean, yes, I put a lot of the blame on KD, but Ben Simmons, like, he just didn't show up. And I really don't want to talk about Ben Simmons anymore. And yes, Kevin Durant is the best player in Team USA history. And no, he's not that. I don't think he's that dude. I'm sorry. Kevin Durant is not that guy. You can't be that guy if you're playing with those guys. Those guys being Steph, Clay, Draymond, Iguodala. You cannot be that guy if you're only that guy with those guys. That's my take on it. But let me actually get into this segment because, Jesus, this is the most active the chat's ever been, and oh my goodness. But let's move on with talking about the nightmare matchups that each team is supposed to expect, or that I expect them to be. So we'll start with the Boston Celtics, since they are the 1 seed. And in the East, I don't really think the Celtics have anything to worry about. I think that their problem is going to come in the finals when they match up against the Denver Nuggets. I think the Denver Nuggets, they have the best chances of winning the championship, and I think they have the best chances of beating the Boston Celtics, if there's any team that is able to beat them. They swept the season series against them, so Boston is 0-2 when going up against Denver. And obviously, it's something that's very concerning coming in from Denver, or not coming in from Boston, because the center situation, it's very, very difficult to guard Jokic. And it's very difficult to guard Jamal. And it's very difficult to guard Michael Porter Jr. when they're hot. And they usually tend to be hot in the playoffs. So that's their nightmare matchup. Next is the Milwaukee Bucks. Their nightmare matchup is the Indiana Pacers. Now, they're 1-4 going against the Pacers in the regular season, and for some reason, the Bucks, they're usually used to running a half-court offense because Giannis is much more dominant in the half court. Well, is expected to play in the half court than play in the full court. Because if you take Giannis full court, it's like you have no shot in stopping him. It's a freight train going straight to the basket, no chance of stopping him. But if you can get him in a half court set, it's a little bit easier to stop. And not only that, when you do get the stops, you can move rather quickly on the fast break. And that's sort of been what the Pacers have been capitalizing on. Now, they haven't really been needing to play that good defense, mainly because Damian Lillard isn't really showing up as much as you'd expect him to when Giannis is in the rotation, and they've only had to worry about Giannis. So, and again, 1-4 record against them. So that's their nightmare matchup going into the playoffs. If they do have to end up facing them, who knows? The Pacers might get eliminated before then. Next team on the list is the New York Knicks. Now, their nightmare matchup. Now, even though I've said that the nightmare matchup for them should be like they have no team like they really need to worry about. You always got to worry about Boston. And this year, the Knicks have been 0-4 going up against Boston, and it's going to be a real challenge to beat that team. It's going to be a real challenge for any team to beat that team. And especially like for the Knicks, because there is a lot of history with the Knicks ending up losing to the Boston Celtics. They always have the number. Boston, for some reason, they always have a number against New York teams. I don't understand. Now, I'm just going to acknowledge the chat just for a little bit. I'll get to the Miami Heat. Just give me a minute, Carrito. But he says, Boston going up against Miami Heat. He takes the Heat in 7. Yeah, but I really that was really fluky, that series. Like, usually the Celtics don't. I understand, like, the Celtics in the previous years, they've lost to the Miami Heat. Yeah, but I really don't have them as a nightmare matchup because going in the regular season, they've been really well. They've played really well against that Miami Heat in the regular season, and their team only got better. They took that team to 7 games, and since that team went to 7 games, the Miami Heat haven't gotten better, but the Celtics, they've gotten drastically better in getting Jrue Holiday. Derek White has finally developed into the star that he is, and Kristaps Porzingis getting a much bigger center that's actually able to match up against Bam Adebayo relatively efficiently. So with that in mind, I don't really have the Miami Heat as a team that can beat the Boston Celtics this year. That's just me. That's just my take on it. Next on this list is the Orlando Magic. And, did my computer just freeze? Yeah, my computer froze for a little second. My bad for that. I have no idea what the heck just happened. My computer just froze. That's always fantastic. More comments. Carrito says, Dame and Giannis just don't fit playstyle. Giannis needs an old school point guard to work. I don't know what you mean by that because theoretically, yes, that playstyle is definitely going to work. It's Dame running a pick and roll and the attention coming off of Dame and going towards Giannis. That is literally like the easiest thing. Compared to what Dame had to play on Portland, that is literally the easiest thing you could think of. And it's just difficult now because Dame is sort of trying to adjust to having that second option and as dominant as Giannis is. And it's really difficult for him to adjust. It's going to take a little bit of time, but this is a Kobe and Shaq type of duo, so it will definitely mesh well. I do not agree with that whatsoever, you saying that Giannis needs an old-fashioned point guard, because theoretically, when you think about it, I mean, you were just saying that Giannis could be paired up very good with Steph Curry, and now you're here saying that Giannis needs an old-school point guard to work. What do you mean by that? Is Steph Curry an old-school point guard? He's definitely not. He shoots the 3-ball a lot, but I digress. Like, that's just my opinion on it, and I definitely think, like, Dame he just needs to figure that out. That's what he needs. That's sort of what he needs right now, just to figure out and to just be efficient, because that's the main problem with him, is that he's not efficient from the field. But I digress. Moving on to the next game, the next team on this list, the Orlando Magic. Orlando Magic. Now, their nightmare matchup, I think, is actually the Miami Heat. They're 1-3 when going up against Miami, and not only that, the reason why I think Miami is going to be their nightmare matchup is because both of those teams play in Florida. So the Heat fans, they aren't going to really need to migrate that far to go and support the Heat. So there's a possibility that the Orlando Magic's home games are actually Heat home games. And home field advantage plays a very, very big role in playoffs games. So if they're losing that home field advantage, it could be a serious problem going into the first round and going into any round, really. But I digress on that. So next team is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the team that has the best chances of beating them and causing a lot of nightmares is honestly the New York Knicks, because the Knicks, they beat them last year and they've only gotten better. So, and also this season, they're 1-2 when going up against New York. So props to New York for that. Now, Carrito, he has more to say. Drew Holiday and Eric Bledsoe type of guard. Again, I gotta argue with that because you said Steph Curry was going to fit just fine, and last I checked, Steph Curry is a modern guard, and Drew Holiday takes a lot of three-pointers, and honestly, Drew Holiday was not that good in a lot of playoff series. I mean, they obviously won together, but there were a lot of games where Drew Holiday was really like the main reason why the games were close. So, and again, they tried it with Eric Bledsoe, didn't really work. So again, I don't really think that there's a problem with pairing Dame up with Giannis, and like, they just need to figure it out. Dame needs to figure it out. He needs to be more efficient. That's literally all it is, and that's the only problem. Next on this list, the Pacers and their nightmare matchup. So I think the Boston Celtics are going to be their nightmare matchup. They have a 2-3 record going up against Boston, and Boston is also the only team that I feel could really counter the pacing that the Pacers play with, because the Boston Celtics, they also play with that kind of pacing, and they also take a lot of three-pointers. So if either teams are on, and if either teams are hitting, it's going to be a very competitive matchup. And I'm just going to skim through the rest of this list just because we are running a little bit out of time. So the Sixers, they're the next team on this list. Their nightmare matchup is going to be the Bucks. Even with or without Joel Embiid, that's going to be their nightmare matchup. They're 0-3 against the Bucks going into in this season. And not only that, the Bucks, they sort of figured it out. They've did, like, not entirely with Dame, but they figured out a winning formula. That's what I meant to say. And again, like, there's a possibility that the Sixers, they don't even make it past the play-in tournament, assuming Joel Embiid doesn't return. We have no idea what Joel Embiid is going to do, how he's going to play coming back from a meniscus injury. It seems like he's trying to get back in around early April. So we will see. We'll see how it works. But next on this list is the Miami Heat. Now, I actually think the Heat's nightmare matchup is going to be the New York Knicks. Now, the Knicks, they beat them twice when matching up against each other. So with a minus of 9 points. So that means that every single game that the Knicks have played against the Heat, they've won by double digits, most of the time. So obviously, this is something that's very, very appalling if you are the Miami Heat, and something that needs to be taken into account. So next team on this list, next team that I want to talk about. Do we even have time to talk about the rest of these games? Yes, we do. We do have time. So I'll bring up the rest of the teams that I have on the list and their nightmare matchup. So the Nuggets, I think it's really difficult picking a team, but I think the Sacramento Kings, they have the best chance of beating them, and that's going to be their nightmare matchup. The Nuggets are 1-3 going up against the Kings, and they have really good matchups to go against each other. The De'Aaron Fox going up against Jamal Murray, Domantas Sabonis going up against Nikola Jokic, and the rest of the rope, Keegan Murray going up against Michael Porter Jr. Those are really, really good matchups, and either one of those players can outperform the other. So it's going to be a very close series if they end up playing against each other. Second is the Oklahoma City Thunder going up against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, again, this was another difficult team to decide on who is going to be their most difficult, their nightmare matchup, but their record against the Dallas Mavericks in the regular season is 2-1. Now, don't let that don't let that record like sort of underestimate like how good this Mavericks team really is. No one wants to play Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving in the first round or in any series of a playoff series. No one wants to play them because Luka is going to be a nightmare. Kyrie is already a nightmare to guard. So with all of that in mind, and the fact that there aren't really that much perimeter defenders on the Thunder. Like, they do have Dort, but I don't think Dort is going to be able to stop Kyrie or Luka. Nothing can stop them in the playoffs. So I think that's going to be their nightmare matchup. Next team is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Their nightmare matchup is going to be the Phoenix Suns. If the Phoenix Suns stay healthy, right now in the regular season, the Suns are 1-0 against the Timberwolves. And again, like the net rating against them is -21. So they blew them out the last time that they played. And again, very, very difficult team to guard, the Suns, because Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and the Timberwolves, they don't really have anyone that's quick enough to really stay in front of Kevin Durant, and they don't have any other. I mean, Anthony Edwards is a great guard, so he'll be able to stop Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, but what if any of the other players decide to go off? That's something that also needs to be taken into account. And the fact that that team is much more reliant on the mid-range and the three-point shot than they are on taking shots in the paint, completely eliminating Rudy Gobert from the equation. So that's something that also needs to be brought up. The Pelicans, their nightmare matchup is the Denver Nuggets. Not much that needs to be said. They are the Denver Nuggets. They are 1-2 going up against Denver, and their matchups are not looking in favor. The Clippers, their nightmare matchup is going to be against the Timberwolves. They are 1-3 going up against the Timberwolves, and again, just a nightmare matchup that they should worry about. They do take a lot of inside shots in the paint because of the spacing that they have. They try to get either Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, or James Harden to drive and take the shots. Not only that, when Russell Westbrook comes back and into the playoffs, chances are Rudy Gobert is going to be guarding Russ, and that will alleviate a lot of pressure from the three-point line because as we know, Russ cannot shoot. He cannot shoot that efficiently. So having Rudy Gobert play Russ, allows Rudy Gobert to play help defense to whoever's inside the paint, and that's something that should be taken into account. The Dallas Mavericks, their nightmare matchup, again, the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets are going to be a nightmare matchup for a lot of these teams going into the playoffs. The Phoenix Suns, their nightmare matchup is the Clippers. And the reason why I say it's the Clippers is because they have really good perimeter defenders and they have a great understanding of the offense that they're in. Kawhi Leonard is a good enough perimeter defender to guard Kevin Durant, and not only guard him, but also put up the same amount of points as him to cancel out his scoring. Same with Paul George. Paul George can not easily, but he can guard Devin Booker to an extent and still produce just enough while still having enough offense to be able to lift the team up. James Harden has enough offense to lift the team up. The Clippers are 2-0 going up against the Suns, so that they have that going for them as well. And then the last team on this list is the Sacramento Kings, and their nightmare matchup is going to be the Pelicans. Now, the Pelicans, they are 4-0 when going up against the Kings. So that's really like the big reason why I chose like the Pelicans to be the nightmare matchup for the Kings. Now, obviously, there's a possibility that the Kings don't even make the playoffs because there's still the thought of LeBron and Steph Curry stealing that spot, and now Houston stealing that spot. So we'll see how LeBron plays and how the rest of the team plays and how it's going to impact the Kings and their seeding and their placements. But with that, we are out of time for this fourth segment, and that is the end of the show. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for more content and updates, and hopefully you guys can follow us on TikTok before TikTok gets shut down. But with that out of the way, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link that is in the description or use the link that is displayed below the ticker on every show segment to get your comments recognized. The link is gsmcpodcast.net. It will put your comments directly in front of my screen. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And again, that is the end of the show. I am your host, Nelson Jimenez, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.